Good afternoon, and welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council Workshop Session, December 10th, 2024. The meeting is called to order. Do we have Mr. Melner on the phone? Okay, make an attempt if you would. I'll call roll call as you're doing that. Councilmember Baldenegro.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Melner. Councilmember Tomanchop.
Here.
Councilmember Turner. Here. Vice Mayor.
Here.
And Chair is present. We'll try Mr. Melner one more time. Okay. If he comes on, let us know, would you please? Okay. With that, Ms. Barg, will you go ahead and introduce item number 1, please?
Downtown Campus Reinvestment Project Update.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide you a most recent update on our downtown campus reinvestment project is Eddie Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Mayor and council, good afternoon. Today is update number 28, and this will be the last one for this calendar year. Since we last spoke, a little bit of highlights for you. Site activities. Since we last had a chance to meet with you back on October 22nd, we've had a couple of activities on the site that would progress on our mock-up and then ceremonially on one of our beam signing ceremonies that we had back in November. Since then, the project has progressed even further as we're completing our major steel installation across the entire skin of the building. The mock-up, as I mentioned, is continuing, and then we are now starting exterior stud framework. And so some of the pictures I'll show you today are about a little over a week old, so a lot more progress has developed since then. We're also doing some selective demolition throughout the site, most recently with the council chambers. So you'll see a couple of photos on what we're doing there. So with that, I want to highlight that back in November 6th, actually, we had a beam signing. And then as scheduled, about a couple weeks after that, we have installed the final major fascia beam. So this is a picture of it being installed the morning of November 21st. So that actually was about a couple weeks ahead of schedule, which is great. So that essentially completes the major exterior structural elements of the building. There are a few other miscellaneous steel components that are going in, and I'll explain where they go, but most of those are associated with shafts in the building, some additional shafts that we put into the building for elevators and mechanical. So that went off without a hitch. We're really excited about that. And for those of you that drive on Glendale Avenue, especially towards Westgate, you can see it. Eventually, that beam will be covered with fireproofing, as well as all of the structural elements of the buildings that were new will be protected with new fireproofing. The second thing I want to mention to you was that for several meetings now, we've talked about our wall mock-up. And what this is, it's a model assembly of what the structural and exterior components will come together like. So this is essentially a live study for the tradesmen to use so they can show how all the elements come together. So from the stud work, the framing, to the skin, to the masonry, and all the waterproofing in between that supports that. So this is a picture that was taken over a month ago, and we do this in phases. So the contractor is actually documenting each step by step. So as we do one piece of the assembly, we take pictures, we meet, we look at it, and if there's any course corrections we made to do that, we do it then, and then we move on to the next step. So it has progressed now further, and so now you can see what the masonry is going to look like on the building, the bonding pattern. This is what they call a stacked bond. Very popular in the mid-century in terms of when it came into vogue, so to speak. So it's a very classic way of using this material. But what's really important about this mock-up is that it helps us understand not only the details, but just the layering of like how to prevent water from coming into the building. So In the previous photo, I'll give you an example. You can see where all the gray material is. All that is waterproofing. And the masonry sits on a steel ledge. And so what we like to do is make sure every condition, it's almost like a bathtub. So as the masonry goes up, the substrate behind it is protected. And so if, due to the elements, heavy wind-driven rain, for example, anything that could penetrate into the skin itself has a way for water to get out and not to actually penetrate into the building. So it's key that we get these details put together. So there's a lot of folks looking at this. The good thing about doing a mock-up is that it helps us understand any fixes ahead of putting it on the building. So it actually helps with the installation process and for the process in general to be much more efficient. So there's an example of the masonry. So we will have other elements coming over time, windows, other accessories and things that, metal panels, some EIFS, all of that to show how the materials for the exterior are coming together. Okay. So the big move that we have right now is that with all that steel in the last 3 months, it's now time to put the framing up. So what you're seeing here is a photograph of the exterior stud wall framing. And it literally sits on all that new steel that we had installed over the last several months. So it goes floor to floor, and these floors are about 13 feet 6 inches between slab to slab. And so they span that entire distance. So this will receive the substrate that you see in that mock-up. And so the next layer will be what we call green board, which will be hopefully later this month for this particular facade that we have. But since this photo has been taken, you can see that the framing has gone up on all the upper levels, 2, 3, and 4. You can see where the height of the new roof parapet will be. You'll see the openings, and you can get an understanding of how that facade will come together. One of the things that we learned in this process is that, and sometimes it's a bit of a moment for a pause to make sure we get things right. The framing that you see in this particular photograph sits on that steel angle, and we discovered that the building had a little bit of an offset to it. We weren't sure what was causing it. So when they put the steel in, the beams were all straight, and their benchmarks were used, and as we started putting the steel stud framing up, we realized that something was off a little bit. We were hitting the slab edge where we need to go past the slab edge. And we realized that as we were shooting this level by level again, we wanted to stop because we weren't sure exactly what was causing it. It looks like the original slab edge had a lot of ins and outs when they poured it. So it wasn't perfectly straight. And we think the theory being is that if you recall the perimeter of the building, the profile, the skin came past the slab edge. So the slab edge didn't have to maybe technically have to be that straight. So in doing this exercise, putting a new skin on, we realized that we had to compensate for that. So this particular facade, all the beams were adjusted. It took a couple of extra weeks to do this, but between looking at it from both measurement and assembly, we readjusted all the levels. And since it's going to happen around the perimeter of the building, we wanted to get this right so we know how to handle it on the opposite sides. So that has been corrected, and so you can see how perfectly straight these stud walls are. So just an example of the energy and the time it takes to resolve some of these complex issues, but it's the right thing to do. It sets us up for success as the building components come together. That said, you can get an idea from the interior how the new window apertures are going to feel. So you can see where there's big gaps here in this shot. That's where the new windows will be. And incidentally, as we go around the building, exterior-wise, we are starting to do layout on the interior. So we're working on layout for HVAC, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, both in ceiling and in the walls. So we're building those cores right now as we speak. So basically, we're lining on the floor or outlining where all those elements will be in the ceiling now, so we can get a jump on that. So all that is done in parallel: the mock-up, the steel, the structural studs, and the HVAC all together at the same time. In the past, you've also seen a lot of pictures of the lowest level of the building where the slabs were torn up, new plumbing was going in, and you saw several pictures on digging out the elevator pit. This is a new elevator that's on the south core of the building. It is now complete. So the concrete on the lower level has been put back, the plumbing is in, the topping is in, and this is an example of how all that digging and all the formwork, once removed, you can get an example here of how the elevator pit works. What's important about this is we had to get this work done ahead of any other openings in the building floors above us. The picture to the right shows how that's been accomplished. So we were moving from bottom up and top down. So we're now at a point now we can complete the remainder of the top down openings for both stair and elevators now that this elevator pit has been complete. So that was kind of a big milestone for the team to get that done. One of the other things that we have happened in the last couple months, and this is due to a lot of this council's approval to allow for earlier procurement of equipment, and in this case it's power. So these are typically long lead items, as much as a year in advance. So we were able to get our generator installed early, which is fantastic. So you see that picture on the left. And eventually our utility company will come in and replace the transformer as well. But this is the new location. This was one of the things we discovered in design that was going to be moved to the garage versus inside the building. So that is now in place. And then while our permanent power is still coming and it's on time, it'll be in the summer, having the ability of our contractor to think outside the box, they have provided us a temporary power switchgear. And that's what you see in the picture on the right. What's good about this is it allows the building to come off generator power until we absolutely need it, and which is a cost savings for us in general because it's part of the construction. And we can use this as our power source for construction. So all of the tradesmen that are out there, the power drills, everything that we use that requires power, we can get it off this particular switchgear. So that's a big thing, and that's a plus of having the guys from Oakland on board with us. Moving to the chambers, there's been a lot of other activity in the chambers since we last spoke. A lot of it had to do with underground plumbing to support the lowest level of the chambers, because we're putting in some new restrooms, and it's part of our back of house function for the amphitheater. Excuse me. And so we had to do a lot of digging. So the picture to the left shows an example of some of the complexities. We learned during the process of putting the plumbing in that the foundations, some of the footings were deeper than we thought. So we had to dig about 4 feet deeper, or excuse me, it was about 4 feet in depth, but was a couple feet more than we were expecting to put the new plumbing in. So it's quite a bit of work there, and even though it looks like it's all Swiss cheese, it does come together. Since these photos were taken, the slabs have been poured back, so that's coming together quite nicely. But a lot of demo work in the bottom, and this is just outside of what would have been the B3 conference room, if you recall. And then finally, the council chambers. So we are continuing to prep the exterior of the building for the next expansion. So we've been concentrating most of the work on City Hall's structural frame. Not too much longer in the distant future, where that water truck is, we'll be working on the structural system that grows the footprint of the council chambers at the first level. And then at the same time, we're putting in new apertures, so new windows around the perimeter of the building. The photo doesn't quite do it justice, but you can see where the donor tree was put before. You can sort of see the shadow mark of the tree that was the installation that was there in the past. We put 2 new windows on either side of that. And if you go around the building, you'll see that those openings have now been cut, especially if you see the webcam. So that is to bring daylight into the chambers. And so that's part of the new facade treatments that will come in the future. So overall, we're doing okay on where we are with progress. We're holding the same schedule. Even though we've had some ups and downs with some of these discoveries in between, we're still holding towards the end of first quarter 26, hoping it's not much longer than that for substantial completion. That's, just to be clear, that's substantial completion. That doesn't mean that the building is completely done. There'll be some punch work and things that happen after that, but that is a major milestone. So we're still tracking that. We want to get it right more than anything else. So even though we have these little small interruptions, we triage them as quickly as possibly can. And right now, if we do it now, this is better than doing it later and having to pull back and uncover mistakes that we'd all regret. So with that, that's our presentation for today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. One, as long as we're still on that slide, the council chambers around on the kind of backside, the northwest side of it,
Yes.
where we're adding on a conference room and a lot of glass on that side. Is there a plan for that glass to be treated so that we don't have thermal gain, and also maybe safety, some sort of higher level of glass for security reasons?
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Turner, I will double check on the film that we may be applying for that from a security standpoint. As far as the glazing material itself, it is going to be an improved energy efficient glass assembly that we're using. So the whole building, not just the chambers, but the entire building is going to be improved with new energy efficient glass.
Good, thank you. And my second question was regarding the permanent temporary power.
Yes.
The temporary power, so we're no longer on generators or whatever. It was my recollection that about this time a year ago, that the street lamps on 58th Avenue in front of the park and in front of the merchants between Glendale and Glen went out, and I believe the reason that was given was it had to do with the construction, and they were all on the same feed or whatever reason that those went out, and they've been out for a year. Will this possibly help us to route that electricity, not from the construction site, but from the former source, to be able to get those street lamps back on?
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Turner, I would say that is it possible? Potentially, but I think the bigger problem we have is that it's the accounting or the we can't exactly, we haven't been able to track down all of the distribution from both the building where the Velma Teague Library currently sits and the actual end distribution of the lamps. So when that came off, we found that not only was part of it connected to City Hall, but all of the other distribution was not in good shape at all. It was just really difficult to even not only audit where they all go, but the condition of that wiring and conduit was pretty poor. So to try to connect all those things was creating more of a potential safety issue than trying to, make it work. And the other part of it is that we're also planning to replace most of that once we start the construction for Murphy Park. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's possible that there's another route from the perimeter where the pedestrians are to light those lamps, but it's not through the park, to the best of our knowledge.
I know that our merchants and residents would really appreciate having that looked into again. A retired employee told me that it could be something, and there's a electrical box in the northeast corner of Murphy Park, and that there may be a tripped breaker or a switch in there that's malfunctioned, and that perhaps he had dealt with that sometime in his career, and that might be another place to look and see if that's the issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Melner, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
You have any questions before we go on to the next item?
No.
Okay. Yeah, no other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bauer, item 3, if you would.
U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development 2025 through 2029 Consolidated Plan Goals.
Mayor, members of the council, here today to provide staff report will be, for her first time, our new Director of Community Services, Kimberly Hall. She'll be assisted by Matthew Hess and Trelise DeLeo.
Yeah, turn your mic on. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The City of Glendale receives federal grant funding on an annual basis from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to invest in programs and services addressing housing, living conditions, and economic opportunities for low to moderate income households. The city is required to develop and adopt a consolidated plan every 5 years that identifies community needs and documents goals to address those needs. This plan ultimately serves as the strategy for investing grant funds for the next 5 years. Today's presentation will provide a preliminary recommendation for 2025 to 2029 consolidated plan. Although there are still several public processes that must take place before finalizing the plan, we were seeking consensus direction today on the high-level goals so that we may open public service grant applications and be prepared with both the final consolidated plan and the recommended investment for FY 2025-2026 in the spring. Now I'll turn over the balance of the presentation over to Deputy Director Matt Hess and Interim Compliance and Finance Administrator Trelise DeLeo.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before we get into the details, the discussion of the presentation, there are a few topics we'll be discussing, including the background on both the consolidated plan and the annual action plans. We will also be discussing the various data sources, the analysis and research that have gone into the recommendations, including the recommended consolidated plan goals from the Community Development Advisory Committee. And then we will be requesting our consensus direction and discussing next steps. So in terms of the plans themselves, they are specific to the funding that we get from the HUD's Office of Community Planning and Development, which is HOME, ESG, and CDBG. The 5-year consolidated plan, as named, covers a 5-year period that looks at various community needs in the context of those funding sources, includes an analysis of data, and as Ms. Hall indicated, provides a roadmap as to how we invest those funds over a 5-year period. The annual action plan, which we will bring back to the council after discussion with the Community Advisory Committee and public feedback, will allocate specific funding to activities that further those goals within the consolidated plan. Again, it's completed every 5 years based on community needs. There is a public participation requirement, including comment periods, public hearings, and such. The final plan, or I should say both final plans, must be approved by the council, which is something that we typically do in April each year, and we must submit both of those to HUD concurrently by May 15th each year. So before I turn the analysis discussion over to Ms. DeLeo, just again, these are the 3 funding sources that are the topic of discussion for the funding. There are a variety of different activities, primarily focused on housing, services for for vulnerable populations, and others.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Trelise DeLeo. I'm going to be discussing our needs assessment data and the sources in which we reviewed. As you can see here, we took a look at a series of data, both qualitative and quantitative. We looked at data from Maricopa County Association of Governments. We looked at our own Glendale 1 service requests. We looked at the U.S. Census Bureau, Justice Court data. We additionally looked at Yardi and multiple listing services information provided for the city of Glendale, as well as conducted a resident survey of our Glendale residents. Most of that data that we examined looked at homelessness and eviction trends. We looked at the prevalence of housing insecurities, affordable housing supply and market trends, as well as income data of our residents. This right here is the point in time count. This is one piece of data that we did review from 2017. As a reminder, the point in time count is held once a year, and it is a measurement of homelessness in the city of Glendale. As you can see here, the trend line is showing an increase year over year. In terms of our Glendale 1 homelessness services, the line appears to be pretty flat with a slight downward trend over time. This information was provided by Maricopa County Justice Courts. This is the eviction trends in the city of Glendale from 2019 to 2024. The trend line is showing an increase in evictions in the city of Glendale during this time. The data also shows when we broke down it by zip code, that the zip code with the highest eviction rates from January of 2024 to October of 24 being 85301. Further, we looked at the U.S. Census Bureau data report that they put out, and that report showed 2 out of 3 Glendale renters in Glendale make 80% or less of the area median income. 45% of those renters spend 1/3 of their income on housing, and 25% of those renters spend more than 50% of their income on housing. This was an interesting slide that we were able to retrieve from MAG. It shows here in 2010, 95% of rentals on the market were under the $1,000 mark. As you can see, affordability over the period of time has decreased, and currently in quarter 2 of 2024, 13% were under $1,000 a month. Looking into home ownership housing market trends, you'll see in 2011, 88% of all homes available for sale were under $200,000. As we discussed about the rental market, you'll see as well in the homeownership market that affordability price point has decreased, and we have about 4% of homes available for sale under $200,000. And then according to MAG, one interesting key point is the median sales price in the city of Glendale is, as of the date of this report, $446,000. So a lot of what I just talked about was the qualitative data. I did want to move more into the quantitative data. Thankfully, this year we were able to partner with our organizational performance department and conducted a community resident survey. As you'll see here, 402 residents of Glendale responded to that, and then 369 open respondents, which we just consider stakeholders of Glendale. Those are business partners, nonprofits, responded to that survey. That survey sought feedback on our community planning and resource allocation under those categories, as you see up there: housing and homelessness, infrastructure improvement, economic development, neighborhood improvements, human and public services, and community and public facilities. So of all the residents and stakeholders who participated in the survey, 58% of them overwhelmingly said housing and homelessness was the highest priority in Glendale. Of that, we broke down the segments within the housing and homelessness services that were asked of those residents. And on this slide and on the next slide, you're going to see the 10 categories that were asked. All 10 categories were ranked as very important or moderately important by everybody who took the survey. One of the things we also wanted to do was allow respondents to voice their own feedback so that they had an opportunity to provide information that if they felt it wasn't covered in this survey, that they could openly respond to what they thought the highest need in the city of Glendale was. And as you can see here in their own words, over 21% of those respondents said building affordable housing was the highest priority. Ultimately, the key findings that we were able to take away from this research was that our most critical needs do continue to be affordable housing, homeless services, and public services for vulnerable populations.
So based on this research and analysis and a discussion with the Community Development Advisory Committee, the CDAC has recommended to continue 4 of the 6 goals that we currently have, the first of which is to continue promoting access to affordable housing, increasing access to homeless services, increasing access to public services for vulnerable populations, and continue to advance fair housing initiatives.
You want to wait till he's done? Question?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got a question for you.
Referring to slide 18 or 19, the continued housing and homeless services, and slide 21, recommended goals and potential activities. There seems to be a disparity here. I noted that the very lowest percentages were for repairing existent housing, whether it's rental or homeowner. And yet on slide 21, under goal 1, homeowner rehabilitation is listed as a top priority. Can you explain why you would put homeowner rehabilitation as a top priority when clearly your survey shows it's the least recommended action?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Clark. At this point, these are just examples of what can be funded, not recommendations for specific activities to be funded, just to give the council an idea of what will be coming or what could be coming in terms of recommended activities in the spring.
Because it would seem to me there are much more pressing issues than repairing a house right now as compared to other needs that you've shown us in this survey. Thank you.
So staff is recommending consensus direction to affirm the goals as recommended by the Community Development Advisory Committee as presented above.
You ready for consensus?
Discussion?
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions, if I could. My first question is the zip code, the evictions by zip code, 85301. I think I might be too far from that. Is that countywide? What is the database for that ranking?
Yes, that is countywide. That is a data set that is put out by Maricopa County Justice Courts on a monthly basis, and a review of each and every eviction filed within that period of time from January to October showed that 85301 had the most eviction filings out of all of the Justice Courts reported.
Okay, thank you. And then I also wanted to find out, you used a $1,000 a month rent as some sort of benchmark. Where does that number come from?
This is a report that is put out by MAG, and it was through MAG's research and analysis of the market on the rental side where they identified the different percentages for those rental rates.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor, if I could continue, the $200,000, somewhere in here you said housing, to be able to acquire housing under $200,000 or less, the median home price in Maricopa County is $479,000. I mean, that doesn't seem like an attainable thing at all. What does the $200,000 represent?
This was a report that was put out by MAG that just shows the changes in the rent or the rental and the housing market over a period of time. And the $200,000 was to show that that was the predominantly affordable rate back in 2010, 2011, and just show how that has decreased and the price of a median home has increased. So it's just showing that I believe the number was 88% in 2011 was under $200,000. And now, as of the date of this report in 2024, only 4% of housing on the market is under $200,000 for sale.
Okay, well, that's a 14-year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I just was wondering, I mean, a $200,000 home, I mean, and I'm in the business, and that does not seem at all attainable. So, okay, I was just wondering what the reference was. Okay, my last question, and this is, how reliant are these programs on HUD and CDBG money? And how soon do you know what our allocation is going to be for the coming fiscal year from HUD and how much CDBG? When do we find that out?
Mayor, Councilmember Tolmachoff, typically HUD announces those in the spring depending on congressional appropriations. So we need to start this process earlier because we can't start the process in the spring. There's not enough time with public participation, research and whatnot. And so typically I would expect us to have the final allocations sometime in March.
So if I could, Mayor, so we anticipate, with our fingers crossed, at least the same allocation that we received last fiscal year, although there's a new administration and new sheriff in town, and they've been quite clear about their intention to cut federal spending. So what happens, and I remember early on in my tenure, we were in DC, and Mayor Wires, Councilmember Turner, and I don't believe Elner was on the council at that time, but we went to DC specifically to lobby for the federal government to continue CDBG funding because they were literally very close to taking it off the table. So I just wonder, what does that process look like if we find out in the spring that we're getting some sort of a major cut to these funding sources, and then what is the downhill from that?
Mayor, Councilmember Tolmachoff, I have heard no indication anything formal that these programs will be cut. However, if that were to occur, typically because we do estimate level funding for the purposes of discussion, generally what we do is we put in a contingency language that says we will proportionally increase or decrease each of the recommended activities. Now, if the program were to sustain a severe cut, then there would be really no other recourse. These programs are fully federally funded, so I'm not quite sure how to respond to that. I don't think that we've ever had that situation.
Can I, before Mr. Rios, before you, so I guess I just want to make sure, so let's just say hypothetically that we find out that there's going to be a 25% cut. Then we would cut each of our allocations by 25% across the board. Is that, or do we reassess needs, or how does that process work?
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, members of the council, I think it's the second. We wouldn't want to just spread it and do kind of like we call sometimes a peanut butter spread and say we're going to cut everything. It would depend in part on what the federal government cut. Let's just say they cut more out of CDBG than they did out of home, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would have to take a look at that. Staff would then make a recommendation, but ultimately it's your plan. So we would be back here at that time talking with you about what our recommendation is on how to cut and where, but ultimately it would be, your update to your plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation on, you just took the slide away. Slides 13 and 14. 14's a fine one to look at. Great slides for showing the cost of housing over time. What would have really been great would have been able to have the average household income plotted against that chart as well, so that we could actually see the real impact there. Whether rising incomes helps mitigate the cost of housing any, or if it's not keeping up, and I think we probably all have our suspicions, but something like that would have been helpful for us to see even more of the big picture. The other question I have is, we don't have anything, we're dealing with CDBG money in this presentation, and maybe so I'm interested in blight remediation that hasn't been mentioned here. Is this the conversation to talk about CDBG money and remediating blight in the community, or is that some other aspect of CDBG that we'd talk about at a different time?
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, blight reduction and neighborhood improvements, as we call them, was contemplated. There are some other programs and funding available to address those needs, and so considering that the continued need for affordable rents, affordable homeownership opportunities, affordable housing, and considering that in general we typically get about $3.3 million among the three different funding sources, we felt, and the CDAC recommended, that we target into the affordable housing or the housing and public services activities, with the understanding that we can pursue programs of that type. So for example, the residential landscape improvement program is something that is reducing blight in the community, using other funding sources, other partnerships to be able to fulfill those needs.
Okay. I'm not sure I heard whether this was the time to have a conversation about blight remediation. It sounded like it just didn't make the cut of priorities, that we're more focused on housing affordability, and which is fine, but I think we all know that it's not just enough to have a house, it also needs to be in a good neighborhood, and that blight also suppresses the economic opportunities and likelihood of businesses relocating and into our community and that sort of thing as well. So I did hear that you mentioned there might be other sources available for blight remediation, which is good. I will say that there's one in particular I'm concerned about, and 11 years ago, the First Southern Baptist Church here at 58th Avenue and Myrtle, which was supposed to have been preserved and restored, was demolished using CDBG monies as blight remediation. But the rest of that block south to Palmer has for all of that time been surrounded by a temporary construction fence with the foundations and rough-in plumbing and electrical exposed, the conduits at least for that, out of the ground. Eventually there was some green tarp put on the fence, but it's been 11, 12 years now that we've had that blight in our downtown, and I think we need to find some way to mitigate that, whether it's great if we can do it with the cooperation of the property owner, but if it takes us doing it ourselves and recouping that money down the road at time of sale or something like that, I'd be glad to see us do that. So if you have sources of revenue in your fund pocket that could go to that, I'd sure like to have it come to the council for a discussion. And I'm sorry if I got a little off your topic, but you got to jump at the opportunities you get up here. Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Melner, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. We have consensus for them to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Thank you. And just finally, next steps, we will be taking recommendations to the CDAC for specific activities for the annual action plan, bringing those back to the council in February or March ahead of a requested council action in April prior to submission of both plans to HUD by May 15th of 25. Thank you.
Okay. Item 4.
Bonsall Park North Sports Courts.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report is Director of Parks, Mr. John Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Mayor and Council, this item is a follow-up item to the request from a September workshop on Bonsall Park North construction project. During the previous workshop, the council requested data comparing the usage of the 2 existing tennis courts and the 2 existing basketball courts. So as a refresher, Bonsall Park is located at the northeast corner of 59th Avenue and Bethany Home Road. And this slide shows the approved master plan for the construction project. As part of the approved master plan, the project included rebuilding the sport courts located in the park. This included the 8 existing pickleball courts, 2 tennis courts, and 2 basketball courts. Council requested more information to determine if usage data would suggest converting 2 existing tennis courts into 2 additional basketball courts instead. So at one time, Bonsall Park had 4 tennis courts, and a previous project that occurred before 2021 converted 2 of those tennis courts into the 8 existing pickleball courts that are there today. So with a short time frame available, staff conducted a non-scientific data collection study. This process that we gathered to gather some usage information. This consisted of 60 separate site visits, chosen on random days and times. The times focused on late afternoon and evening hours to capture the highest number of court users at the park. Some of the day visits had multiple day visits, so it's possible that some court users may have been counted twice during the same evening, so there could be some duplication in those numbers. So the court numbers that we looked at, well, maybe at this point it's worth being Captain Obvious here. Basketball courts could accommodate at times up to 10 players at a time, where tennis courts generally would max out at 4 players at a time. So just wanted to throw that out there. So our user count showed 176 basketball court users and 83 tennis court users during those 60 site visits. We also looked at the Ocotillo Park inventory for both tennis courts and basketball courts. There are 16 parks within the Ocotillo district, and that includes Bonsall Park. We also included 2 parks that are immediately border along the Ocotillo district, that being Rose Lane and Sands Park, that are both located in the Cactus district, but they are right on the border with Ocotillo district. So that gave us a total of 18 parks here we go, 18 parks that we studied. 2 of these 18 parks have a total of 4 tennis courts, and 8 of the existing parks have a total of 12 basketball courts. At the last month's council voting meeting, the council approved the construction contract for Bonzo Park North at just over $3.2 million. The amount in this contract includes either of the following options. And those options would be, first one, refurbish as is, meaning remain 2 tennis courts and 2 basketball courts. Or the other option would be to refurbish all of them as basketball courts. This option would have a slight savings of about $33,000 if we were to resurface as all basketball. This option would also leave the Ocotillo District with no tennis courts, although the adjacent Sands Park would have 2 tennis courts nearby. With that, staff is seeking direction for which option. Either refurbish as is, which would leave the existing 2 tennis courts and 2 basketball courts, or refurbish as 4 basketball courts and which would replace the tennis courts. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Mr. Baldonegro if he believes that the tennis courts would be utilized more so than 2 additional basketball courts. It seems to me the basketball courts would be much more popular. It seems that way, but I'm going to ask the council member if he'd say his opinion on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's I like the reference of a Captain Obvious. I don't think we ever had that official in a meeting, so that was nice. The second thing is I know basketball, you can have in any game 2-on-2, 5-on-5. You can have 10 players playing full court with. So I mean, those numbers can be a little bit kind of like misleading. However, I know you have your direction is leave as is 2 and 2, or to do 4 basketball and 0 tennis, which would, you said, come to a savings of $33,000, I believe, as you said that. And as much as I want to do what's right for the community. If there was ever to be a 3-and-1, what's the cost in that? So that we're just not completely eliminating it and now just becoming only at other parks?
Mayor, council members, Councilmember Baldonegro, that's a good question. There would be a compatibility challenge if you were to take the existing footprint of the 2 tennis courts that are side by side.
Correct.
If you were to try to do 1 tennis court and 1 basketball court within that footprint, there's some compatibility challenges. With the tennis courts as is, there's no fence in between the 2 courts. And it's typically accepted, you might see a tennis ball splay over, and that's an accepted and still in a safe method. Introducing a basketball court to be immediately adjacent to a tennis court, you would have to try to mitigate that with a taller fence in between, which that could be a solution. However, there's not enough space in between to have enough buffer on the sidelines of both tennis and basketball if you were to do that, which would create potential safety challenges if you were to try to mitigate the interference from the basketball and tennis interfering with the other sports. So that's the reason why we did not include that as an option.
I understand. And then, again, thinking back when I was a kid versus what it is now, tennis was not as popular back then as it is now. Basketball is growing in popularity, clearly by your numbers here. So whereas before I was concerned that we would eliminate all tennis courts, personally I don't have a problem refurbishing as 4 basketball and 0 tennis. If we could also have like something in its place where tennis players come and they're like, hey, what happened? If we have something that says, hey, the closest tennis court from here is, something to that effect, so they're not left, so it doesn't seem like we didn't care. No, hey, look, we love that you're coming to the park. The closest one now is going to be here or there. I would like to see if we could do something to that effect, something simple.
Yep. Mayor, council members, Councilmember Baldonegro, the nearest tennis courts, if these were to be removed, would be at Sands Park. So a little bit, it'd be outside the Ocotillo District right there at 55th and
about a mile and a half.
Yeah,
About a
correct.
mile and a half north.
Yeah, correct. So this would leave this area with no tennis courts, at least the Ocotillo district with no tennis courts within that district.
I mean, I understand the popularity of both sports have grown. I'm okay with the four basketball and 0 tennis, again, as long as we have something that directs people to the closest ones. And I don't even know, like, if Glendale High School has, I know the racquetball courts are open to the public. I don't know if the tennis courts are. They may be locked. I don't remember. But if we could have something there to redirect them to Sands or somewhere else, I would appreciate if there's something we could do for that. For me to be able to say 4-0 basketball, I can understand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm willing to follow the council member whose district is represented here's recommendation. And I don't know, I mean, I feel like tennis is becoming less popular and pickleball is becoming more popular, and there's 8 pickleball courts there. So I feel like the basketball courts are going to get used. Will they be lighted? Will no matter where we go, they'll all 4 courts be lighted?
Mayor, council members, Councilmember Tomachoff, yes, these all are lit courts.
Okay, because during the hotter times of the year, it's too hot to play basketball until the sun goes down. So, okay, thank you.
Anything? Nothing? Mr. Milner, any comment?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Baldenegger's recommendation.
Okay, so are you looking for consensus on that item?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a consensus to just go strictly for basketball courts. I certainly would support that. You have consensus.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Item 5.
Council discussion regarding selection of a vice mayor.
Mayor, council members, good afternoon. In accordance with the charter, the Glendale City Council will designate amongst its members a vice mayor. At this time, the council will discuss and indicate what nominations you intend to make at the next voting meeting. If nominations are indicated by council members this afternoon, a formal nomination and selection process will be placed on the agenda for a special voting meeting later this evening. The vice mayor will serve the remainder of 2024 and through 2025.
Are you done?
That's it.
That was like way too fast. Vice Mayor.
It's your item.
Yes, Mayor. It will be my intentions on nominating Councilmember Tomachoff.
Okay.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
it will be my intention to support Councilmember Tomachoff as vice mayor.
Okay. We have any other intentions for nominations?
Mayor, I have a couple of questions. One is, we're deviating from our council policies. Council policy says we do this in January, and the election for vice mayor going forward will occur after the swearing in of the new council members.
Correct.
I'm confused as how outgoing council members can nominate and support after they've left office.
Good question. The reason why we need to do this before January is because we're going to be 2 council members short, and council members coming in need to be part of that. It was my understanding, and I don't know, somebody can correct me, that we were going to have our regular voting meeting. We were going to adjourn, swear in, and then have a special on election of vice mayor. Is that not correct?
Yes, a special voting meeting is scheduled.
Yeah. So they will be voting, not our current council members that are leaving, the council members that will be coming on.
Right. That's kind of what I saw in the agenda as well. So on that side, I'm confused as how council members who won't be on the council and won't have a vote in the proposed special council meeting will be nominating and supporting the selection of vice mayor.
Yeah, obviously, if they're not sitting at the dais when we go into our special meeting, and then they won't be doing that. It'll have to be the council members that are sitting here. You're correct.
Correct. And so I would suggest, and I'll do it if necessary, I would suggest we might need to arrange somebody else to nominate Councilmember Tomachoff for vice mayor.
Okay, but, and it's open to anybody.
I know, but it's just confusing if we're telling ourselves and the public that two members of the council that aren't going to be on the council are doing this. It kind of makes me think this whole thing hasn't been well thought out. But I'm clearly under the impression that the votes have been counted both among the existing and the new council. And if Councilmember Tomachoff is willing to be vice mayor, I'll be happy to nominate her tonight. But I'm still concerned about why we're changing our normal order of business. And this has been a problem here at our city council. It's a problem at the state and federal level too. We have adopted council policies that we just deviate from at a whim. And 10 years ago, when some of us came on this council, we were in the exact same position. The sitting vice mayor was leaving office as of the first meeting in December, and we did just fine, not having, quote, a vice mayor at that time until the January scheduled meeting in which we took care of that business. And our policies say if we don't have if the mayor and the vice mayor are both unavailable for some reason, still in office but simply unavailable, that there's a fail-safe to that as well. That then the seat goes to the longest serving council member to fill in the gap. You know, say both the mayor and vice mayor are out of town or something like that. It's not not that the office has been vacated, but just if they're out of town or unavailable, if they both ended up, sick with the flu at the same time or something like that. I just don't understand. I see no reason for us to deviate from what our adopted council policies. There's no emergency here that I'm aware of or that's been evidenced, and let's handle this in January like our adopted policies say we should. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor,
Oh, go
this is Councilmember Mel.
Oh, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I'd like to have Mr. Bailey weigh in on this. If there's such a concern to me, it seems very logical that under these circumstances where the council member who is currently vice mayor will no longer be on the council, that it only makes sense to go ahead and appoint that person early. I don't see that it is a violation of our procedures. It's just filling in the gap. So I disagree that it's really not following policy because we are taking a policy that is not perfect, that is not spelled out in every potential aspect of what happens when certain things arise. And so I think it'd be totally appropriate to nominate at this meeting tonight our vice mayor, and I would also concur to nominate Councilmember Tomachoff.
Thank you. Okay, and I'll do the best I can to explain why I think it's important. I have no intention of dying. I don't. That's not my plan. But if I did, and we don't have a vice mayor, and I'm not here, then I think it creates a problem that this council simply don't need when we can take care of it tonight. It's not a steadfast rule. It's a procedure. It's not a steadfast rule. If this council decides entirely that that's what we're going to do, we can do that.
Well, it is a council adopted policy, and as it was presented, the question that was presented to us today was not about electing an interim vice mayor to cover the period from now till the first meeting in January, which our policies call for. It was about electing one now to cover until January of 26. And the policy itself does address what happens if in this situation, as you presented it, not me, is if you should die between now and the first meeting in January, then the member with the highest, with the longest tenure would serve. But again, that's not likely to happen, and nobody here wishes for it. Well, I can't speak for the audience, but I know nobody up here at the dais wishes for that to happen. So, it makes no sense to have rules if we're going to be breaking them at every opportunity. And so I just think it's unwise. But wisdom's not guaranteed.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Mr. Milner.
Yes. Is there language that was alluded to that that would allow for an interim vice mayor? Or is that not addressed in the charter?
I don't remember ever reading anything about an interim. Mr. Bailey.
Okay.
Mayor and council, the section governing the vice mayor in the charter speaks to the fact that that there will be one that serves at the pleasure of the council, and there is not anything greater than that related to really technically the vice mayor position. It's just ultimately there will be one, and it will be at your at you as the whole body. You'll be your pleasure. But then in terms, that's what the charter says. But then when you go to the guidelines, and let me go to them here. It's let's see. It speaks to at the first workshop of January in each year. We'll consider the appointment at that workshop. They'll be discussed by the council. If nominations are indicated, the next regular voting meeting. So it says if the vice mayor is unavailable for any reason, the remaining council member will be the one of the most years of service. So they'll serve as interim. I read that language as if there is a vice mayor that is unavailable, so that person is not standing in its stead, rather than that the office is vacant. But you do not have language that speaks to the vacancy in the vice mayor position. It only relates technically back to that there is a vice mayor position that's chosen once a year and is then at the pleasure of the council. So to the extent that the council wanted, if that's, again, what the council wants to do, and as I understood Mr. Lee, is that the action that you would be taking would be to fill in the interim, and then also be for the next year. While it is not in January, I guess the cure would be just to take two separate actions, if that's what you wanted to do. And you would have the prerogative to do that. Because, again, uniquely enough in your guidelines, the effect of a violation does not provide a basis for challenging the validity of any enactment, resolution, decision, determination, or recommendation by the council, board, or commission. So if you wanted to, as a collective body, make a decision to act that may be deemed contrary, you have that flexibility that's built in there. Whether or not you want to do that, that's your choice.
Okay. So we can legally do what we were proposing to do, correct?
Yes, I believe that the most important element is it's that the charter speaks that there will be a vice mayor, that you're looking to appoint a vice mayor, and you could take in action for somebody to fill in the gap, and then also appoint for the next term. Though it does reference it that it would be in January. And this is a little unique in the regard that there will not be a vice mayor for a time period.
Clear as mud. Okay, so let me state what I believe that I think that we're doing, and then because when you got done talking, I wasn't sure what you said. My intentions, my hopes was that we have a vice mayor that will be in place in case something happens to me for the next year and 3 or 4 weeks. That we have a vice mayor that's leaving tonight, that we don't have a vice mayor. I think we need to have a vice mayor just in case. And it's not because I'm planning on going anywhere, but I do think that we owe our citizens that. And I don't want to go through the motions twice if we can help it. So if the council as a body decides that we have enough people that would like to see Vice Mayor Tomachoff voted in tonight for the next year plus month or weeks, then that's what I would like to see happen myself. And I'll still entertain any discussion that anybody has.
Mayor.
What?
I think it's been, I think we've discussed it enough, and what's going on is probably clear to make sure it's clear to all of us and to the public that might be watching as well. But the one thing that perhaps they may not be clear about is that the vice mayor does not become mayor if the mayor passes away or leaves office. That's not how that works, and the charter doesn't say that, and our guidelines don't say that. This is just somebody who can, it's just a matter of running the meetings and cutting the ribbons and signing the proclamations until a new mayor is voted on by the remaining council members. And being vice mayor has nothing to do with inheriting the mayor's position, just so that the public's clear. And hopefully the council's read the charter and understands that that's how that works.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Thank you. Item 6.
Vi Resorts Parking Garage Space Use Agreement.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report on item number 6 is our Director of Economic Development, Jesse Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present on the Vi Parking Garage Use Agreement. Just to provide some background on this agreement, so the city acquired approximately 19.7 acres located at the southwest corner of Cardinals Way and 91st Avenue to support the city's economic development growth within the Sports and Entertainment District, which includes Westgate, the Desert Diamond Arena, and State Farm Stadium. I want to just be very clear that when we see approximate numbers here on acres, it's very much that. They are approximate numbers. So you're going to see that on this slide in general and in the staff report. And just an important note that acreage is approximate and remains as such until the closing. So in July of 2024, Vi Resorts contracted with the city to purchase approximately 8.25 acres of the vacant parcel to construct a private parking garage, which is consisting of 4,250 private parking spaces. The Vi parking garage is currently under construction. Vi will own, maintain, and manage the operations of that garage. The city remains the owner of the unimproved remnant lot, which is approximately 11.45 acres, adjacent to that parking garage located generally at the southwest corner, again, of Cardinals Way and 91st Avenue. Also, as a note, Vi has a limited first right of refusal to purchase that remnant parcel.
Go ahead. Microphone.
I thought I turned it on. I've never heard the term limited first right of refusal. Do you mean by duration, or what do you mean by that?
Councilmember Tomachev, I might have to defer that specifically to our attorney, so
First right of
misspeak.
refusal is first right of refusal.
Mayor and Council, the first right of refusal is limited both in time and money. So it's limited that it must be exercised within a set period, which is contained in the purchase and sale agreement. It's not in this agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. So to outline the use agreement and understand what the terms are. So the city's desiring to acquire the rights to use 800 of those designated parking spaces on the ground level of the Vi parking garage. And those parking spaces would be dedicated for the benefit of the adjacent unimproved city parcel. So it could provide dedicated parking that would increase the value of that parcel. It would allow for the attraction of higher quality of development on that parcel and in the area. It allows for greater building height and density because those dedicated parking spaces could accommodate more people, and to support surrounding venues and future development that continues to grow within the Sports and Entertainment District. And it also could provide options to the city to make available critical parking to assist in the successful bidding for large-scale mega events that result in significant positive impact to the city. So those 800 ground spaces are comprised of 600 spaces available to use by the city at all times and 200 spaces available for use by the city between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., 7 days a week. So just to outline what the terms of the agreement are, the initial term would be for 25 years. The agreement would commence shortly after the parking garage completes its construction and is issued a certificate of occupancy. And the agreement also affords the city 2 additional 10-year renewal terms. So that's a total allowable agreement term of 45 years. So to break down what the usage fee is, the use fee for the initial 25 years would be $14,875,000. And each 10-year renewal term would be $1.5 million. So in total, that's $17.875 million for the 45-year term, which is less than $1.36 per day per parking space over 45 years. I think it's important to note here that in comparison to the average cost to construct a parking space in a garage is around $27,900 a space. That's just the construction of a parking garage, single space. That doesn't include what land can cost. That doesn't include operation and maintenance, or even the beautification and landscaping that can go around a parking garage. That's a pretty baseline number there. So I also think it's important, just from a staff perspective, to acknowledge that the opportunity to be able to secure these 800 spaces in this area for less than $1.36 per day per space is a significant opportunity for the growth that's taking place in that area. I want to point out that not all parking spaces are built equally. So covered parking and the proximity of parking is incredibly important and valuable, especially in Arizona. You consider the weather, you consider the type of development that can come, and the variability of the benefit and value of these parking spaces in that area. I mentioned on that previous slide the ability to attract mega events. Those have a significant economic impact. That vacant parcel, Class A office space that could be attracted is very different than, other uses that could come on there. So there's such a variability of what these parking spaces could, one, benefit the area short-term and long-term for economic development in the area, but also for the city, because we do have, again, they are fully assignable parking spaces. So we do have the opportunity as a city to be able to capitalize on that element of these parking spaces as well. So this parking garage space use agreement is currently on the agenda tonight, for the voting agenda tonight for council consideration. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Peterson. So I'm going to kind of go down your list here. Your first bullet point suggests that this will increase the value of the remaining 11 and a half or so acres. Can you please quantify that?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachev, as I just mentioned, I would be a little remiss to quantify that in this moment right now, and the reason I say that is because the value of those types of parking really depends on what develops on that land. So I think it actually gives the city a lot more flexibility when you start to evaluate the best and highest use for development on that property as to what those parking spaces could be worth. So again, Class A office space coming to that property, and it could become very attractive for that, would be different than another use. What we understand and recognize is covered parking in proximation to it, no matter what, will increase the value. But again, I'd be remiss to put an exact value here at this time.
Mayor, can I continue? Thank you. Okay, so would you say that it's feasible that it would increase the value of that land by $1,561,135 per acre, or $36 a square foot, when we just sold the parcel for the parking garage, or I don't believe it's closed yet, but the price was $21 a square foot. So do you think there's any scenario where this adds $36 a square foot of value to the remaining parcel?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Tomachev, again, I think it would be a little premature for me to answer specifically that. What it is my understanding, and again, please, Mr. Phelps or Mr. Bailey, correct me if I'm wrong, that in the first right of refusal, as Michael Bailey mentioned, that there's a price element there, that it is a minimum, and that this council does have the opportunity to acknowledge a higher price per square foot should the market dictate that at that time.
Mr. Phelps?
Yeah, maybe I can add some context, Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Tomachev. I think it's difficult to say, did it add inherent value to the land itself without understanding the revenue implications to the city long-term over the 45-year period by having development that pays different types of taxes and fees back to the city. So I think that would be one thing that as we go to sell that land, we'd be looking for opportunities for things that drive the revenue. Additionally, there's kind of two other things I think where there's potential revenue. One, we haven't calculated, but we don't have to give the land to the adjacent parking, but we could enter into long-term leases from a revenue standpoint. And again, so we'd have to calculate what the value of that parking is to an adjacent property owner over the 25 or 45-year period. There will also be opportunities to potentially enter into lease agreements, say with the adjacent Via Resort, where if they have on a high-use night or a high volume night, they need additional parking. We could, they don't have control of that. We could then enter into additional revenue agreements on that as well. And then I think finally on the bigger picture is that we know that a large event like a Final Four or Super Bowl, parking is always an important part of the equation about attracting these events. And just a single event alone, if that were part of a package that helped attract a major event, it would also have that's far would exceed the amount of what the cost of the space is. And then finally, it still, because for us, the space there becomes another venue that we can do community events for. In other words, we could utilize this space below on the 600 spaces for community fairs, car shows, etc. And we haven't had a chance to calculate that out at this point. But I think the best way to look at it is it's not any one item would justify, but a combination of items that would justify the acquisition of the spaces.
Mayor, thank you. So in order just for the taxpayers to break even, this investment would have to generate over $600 million in taxable revenue. That's just to break even on the cost that's being proposed. So that's a long ways to go to even pay the money back. And then when you talk about attracting development, what is to prevent whoever acquires that property from negotiating their own agreement with the owner of the parking garage? Is there anything in place to prevent that from happening? I don't know who to ask that to, but.
Mayor, members of the council, are you talking about when the city goes to either lease or sell the vacant parcel next door to this? Well, obviously, what we would do is before we would entertain any kind of a proposed purchase and sale to bring to the council, we would look at what type of development's going there, what they're willing to pay for it, and what the economic benefit is back to the city.
But what I asked was, what is to prevent whoever that person is from negotiating their own? So I guess what I'm saying is that right now there's nothing in place to even generate a single dollar of revenue off of these 800 parking places. Vi's got another over 3,000 parking places to park people in. We don't have any agreement in place to generate a single dollar of revenue off these 800 places. So we're taking the risk that somebody sometime is going to need to acquire these parking places from us to use them. So I believe that's a risk. So what would prevent an end user or users from that 11.5 acres from negotiating their own deal with the owner of the parking garage, not the parking places, the owner of the parking garage, to acquire leases for dedicated spaces for their development? Is there anything in that would prevent that?
Mayor, and just to clear the record, just really quick, and then to comment on that, we would not have the right to lease these spaces. This is just a right to use. So we are prepaying.
I'm asking if
I need to clear the record before, and I know what you're asking, but I want to clear the record that we won't be leasing. It's just we have the right to assign these freely. So we can assign them to somebody. So as we speak about this, we're saying lease, but we don't have the right to lease because this isn't a lease, and our ownership, we don't have an ownership interest in this parking garage. As it relates to the vacant parcel, the only entity that has there's only two entities that currently have a right on it. It's the city because we are the owner, and then it's actually in accordance with the purchase and sale agreement with the Via Resort that they have a right of first refusal that requires them to submit to us what is it that they are actually planning, and the city has the ability to negotiate at that time any restrictions or rights associated with that, including the fact that there is an obligation or let's even say a commitment on that parcel of property that we've already acquired parking for. So that can be negotiated at that time when we sell it.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking, but thank you for that, Mr. Bailey. And that could be negotiated whether or not Vi needs to use those 800 spaces if they decide to acquire that property, which they have first right of refusal to do. There's nothing in place that they are required to lease those or for us to sublease or assign, I guess is the term that's used in those spaces to them. They can say we don't need them. We're not going to include that in our offer. And I don't know that we could refuse their offer based on that. So I'm going to move on. My point was, if it's not Vi, if it's some other user that comes in and buys that parcel, there's nothing to prevent that person or entity from negotiating their own, forget about this deal, saying this deal didn't exist, to negotiate their own use agreement with Vi for use of those parking spaces. Whoever develops that could make that deal. So I'm going to move on because I think I'm confusing people. The idea of the mega events, we just hosted in 2023 a Super Bowl, and we also just hosted the NCAA Final Four, and we parked everyone. And I'm not aware that there was any problems in parking every single person that attended the Super Bowl and the Final Four. So I just think that we're taking on a risk that somebody someday is going to need these parking places. We don't have any certainty to provide the taxpayers that they're going to get their money back. And I don't believe that this is the right risk to be taking with taxpayer money. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This just seems so wrong to me in so many different ways. A few months ago, we had a conversation about doing a public-private partnership with Vi about building a garage together, and that we would invest the land and cash into, and we would own the garage, and we would own our fair share, a pro rata share of the revenue stream from the garage. And then eventually, and then not too darn far down the road, the revenue share back to the taxpayers would have covered their investment in that garage, and we would have been in a position going forward that could be income to the city beyond what our investment was. And we also protected the taxpayers by having a clause in that agreement that the city retained the right to sell that revenue stream if we wanted to. So we did a great job on that concept of protecting the taxpayers, but we're not able to do that garage because of very poorly designed and negotiated parking settlement agreement from 8 years ago that gives the owner of the football team and ASTA way too much control over city-owned property out there. To some degree, that's water under the bridge. But the point is we were doing our best at that time to protect the taxpayers. Now and that was going to be somewhere $23 million investment with a rate of return. Now we're looking at spending authorizing up to $17.5 million over the course of the first term and the 2 renewal terms, which, interestingly enough, the cost of building a new library in Murphy Park was also estimated at a little over $17.5 million. So a few weeks ago, we didn't have the money to build a new library in Murphy Park, but this week we have the money to buy unneeded, unnecessary, speculative parking spaces in a parking garage with the Vi Resort. And there's nothing that gives us any part of an income stream for those parking spaces. There's no immediate return at all to the taxpayers for it. The idea that it can be used, that it may enhance the value of the remaining land that we own, as Councilmember Tomachoff has illustrated, that it's just virtually inconceivable that land could go up in value for us to break even on these spaces. But it also, if that's the design of this agreement, it severely limits us as to who we might in the interest of taxpayers down the road, we might want to buy that parcel. Now, the Class A office space was mentioned as if that's like the golden cow of development, and it surely isn't. I mean, if you've been watching what's happening to the office space market across America and other Class A office space projects in the West Valley, it's highly speculative that we would attract Class A office space in that volume, or that we even need to. It may turn out far more likely that what we need in that Westgate area is additional residents with disposable income to help support the commercial activity in that area on a day in and day out basis, not up and down for the weekends and special events, but to provide a base of support for economics out there. Things like grocery stores and restaurants and the rest of that out there. And so for us to speculate that they're a developer that could come and provide us that type of a development and burden them with having to park their residents over next door in a parking garage rather than on site or down below of a parking tower, which is what your high-end residents are going to want, actually probably devalues the desire for that property in my mind. And we shouldn't be speculating like this with taxpayer money anyway. There is no path to solvency in this proposal. We're just leasing parking spaces we have no use for, and honestly, I think it is a way in which to move money out of the taxpayer's pocket and over into a private developer's pocket. And I tell you, I hope to heck that the Goldwater Institute and the Enterprise Club and the Center for Law and the Public Interest in Arizona are paying attention and perhaps even watching this meeting. I think this is risky and unfair to our taxpayers. It's highly speculative. And I know when some of us came into office a few years back, the common cry among our citizens was no more bad deals. After having been involved with things like the spring training facility and other issues like that had virtually bankrupt the city. It was no more bad deals. Well, this is another bad deal, and I won't be surprised at all if the people who supported previous bad deals would support this as well, but I'll not support it. If this is a concept that needs to go anywhere, it needs to go back to the drawing board and to develop it with a piece of the revenue stream, a guaranteed piece of the revenue stream for our taxpayers. And it doesn't exist here. We have far better ways to use $17.5 million in our city, and we shouldn't be speculating in development. Thank you.
Mr. Melner, anything?
Yes, I'd just like to add one comment. You know, sometimes you have to stand back and look at the project holistically. As I recall from our economic analysis, the Vi Resort is going to be bringing into the city alone $30+ million a year. And then to the state and to the other local entities, there'll be millions and millions and more dollars. So when you say it's not viable, Councilmember Turner, I don't see that being the case. I see this as being part of a larger process, a larger deal. You know, it's getting this resort online and generating revenue. And that's really what I'm most concerned about, is getting it online and creating revenue. Because we've shown that the revenue will be there. So it's not going to be a loser for the taxpayer. This amount of money that's being invested, we're going to get back 10 times every year. It just doesn't make sense that we are thinking that this is a bad deal when overall you have to look at the entire project. The Vi Resort, we've been trying to work with a lot of obstacles in our way to make the Vi Resort come together and to be one of the elite resorts of the entire state and the region. And so, given that, I believe it is very important that we do support this at this time, that we provide support to move forward and make this happen so that we can get this bioresort, that it can get open, and we can start generating the revenues that we've been predicting.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you respond, and then we'll go to you.
Okay. I'm highly certain that this $17.5 million in parking spaces is not going to make or break the Vi Resort. They've got well over $1 billion invested out there, and 17.5 is nothing to them. But it is interesting that it's an admission, apparently, on the council member's behalf, that the reason that we're doing this is to benefit the Vi Resort. And we can't be spending taxpayer money to benefit private enterprise without a legitimate business reason in return. If Vi Resort needs these spaces, if they honestly need these spaces, they have them, they own them, and they can use them. If they don't need these spaces, we have no other use for them either at this point in time. We don't need to be taking our taxpayer money and shoring up, and I don't even think it's shoring up the Vi Resort. I think the Vi Resort is going to be fine. This isn't, 17 million is not going to make or break them. And it's detrimental to our city today, and it could, well, it's speculative, and it could be detrimental to our city down the road. If we get a good developer that comes in but wants to provide their own parking on the last remaining piece of what we own out there, and they want to provide their own parking, the pressure's going to be on for them to buy this parking instead because of what we have invested in it. And we shouldn't be putting our taxpayers in that position, or the prospective developers in the future. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want you to reflect on the numbers. The maximum amount that the city will spend will be $17,875,000 over 45 years. I didn't divide 45 into 17 million, but it's got to be a couple $100,000 a year. The point that you must keep in mind is that when Vi is fully operational, it's estimated to generate revenue of $32 million a year to the city. Now multiply 32 million a year times 45. I didn't do that either, but that's got to be an astronomical figure. The 800 spaces that the city gains from this parking agreement can be utilized in a lot of ways, but one of the most important ways in which I think it can be utilized is GoDaddy, who owns Westgate, continues to consume vacant parcels and vacant parking spaces. As they continue to develop more and more of Westgate, parking for Westgate will become more and more of a premium, which will drive consumers to use this parking garage. There are benefits to the city from making sure that Vi is preeminently successful. One of the things that will make Vi preeminently successful is to have that parking for their customers. That is why we sold them the land. That is why they are willing to own, operate, and maintain a parking garage for the benefit of their customers. The more customers they attract, the greater the revenue to the city. I consider it a bonus that the city is allowed in this agreement to have 800 spaces, which can be used in a variety of ways. The income that we derive from VI over 45 years far outweighs the $17.8 million over 45 years. And I think you have to look at it in those terms. I don't think it's a risk. I think the greater risk is in not having those parking spaces for VI or for the city to use, because it makes it more difficult for customers to enjoy VI. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else?
If I may, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I think you're incorrect about who owns Westgate. It's not GoDaddy, it's Yam Corp. And I don't believe Bob Parsons, who owns Yam, is vested in GoDaddy anymore. So that ought to be clear to people, and also goes to credibility. The other thing I'd like to point out, you know, the more we speak, not me, but the more we, speak about how much this benefits VI Resort, I think the deeper y'all dig yourselves in the hole about whether or not this is a gift or not. And as far as the proximity to Westgate, we need to keep in mind that this parking garage is clear the other side of the football stadium and its parking lot from Westgate. And in fact, according to Google Earth, it is 1 mile from the center of where I believe the parking garage is to the center of Westgate where the Yard House is. I don't think there's any chance that you're going to have people parking in this garage and walking even by the shortest path, a straight line, which they probably can't do through the parking lots, all the way over to Westgate. So I think it's disingenuous to try to sell this as something that's going to benefit Westgate proper and Yam Properties. And if Yam wants to expand and move over here and buy the remainder lot from us when in the future, I'd love to have them do it. But I'm also confident they can build their own parking garage if they want one. And importantly, they can negotiate with VI Resorts to lease or buy any excess parking that VI has. But if VI needs this parking, they should be providing it, or they should be compensating our residents for using what would be taxpayer-owned parking. And there's no provision in this for that to happen.
Mayor, may I?
Go ahead.
There's a lot of discussion that's occurred about that VI gets to use our spaces. They do not. This agreement does not allow them to use our spaces. We have the right of 800 spaces exclusively in the garage. If VI, if Westgate, if the Super Bowl committee, if the Fiesta Bowl committee, if any major event needs parking, the city has the ability, including other developments in the area, this allows the city to assign that. It would be, of course, our recommendation when an assignment is, the request to assign it to them comes forward, that we would do that in exchange for compensation. So I want to make sure we understand the basis of this deal as we've reviewed this and drafted this is not based on the tax revenue that's going to be generated at VI Resort. Quite contrary to that. It's based on the fact of what would a parking garage cost, what it, in terms of this being an alternative to the cost of a parking garage, and the ability of the city having this exclusive right to use these spaces has the ability to freely assign that. If VI wants to use our spaces, they have to request it. They do not have the right to freely use our spaces. I just want to make sure we're clear on that, because there's two elements of this, and one's the business risk, and then the other's associated with the legal side. And I want to make sure everybody understands clearly that this was not drafted with the understanding that this was generating any sort of tax revenue. So that may be the basis upon which some of you may be motivated from a business decision to do it, but that's not how it was crafted. So I just want to make sure that the record's clear on that. Thank you.
Okay. There's no more discussion. We're going to move on. You don't need a consensus or anything. This is for informational only. Okay, city manager's report.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I have both a verbal report real quickly and then also our video that we've been doing. So following our previous council workshop where we had a discussion, or you had a discussion on the call to the public, Councilmember Baldernagel had reached out to me to inquire as to whether there was any potential technology solutions to be able to, on one end, kind of make sure that what we broadcast out meets standards, at the same time to be able to continue to keep the video going and continue to have the citizens' comment portion of the meetings broadcast out. So based on his inquiry, I reached out to our communications team and asked them to do some research in the past 10 days on this item. And what they've been able to find out is there is technology that will meet with our existing broadcast system, including what we would do on streaming outward, like to other platforms other than through Channel 11, and that we can acquire that, and it's actually relatively inexpensive. And you can put anywhere from a 2-second to a 20+ second delay on that, and we can also include basically the ability to cut the feed if something took place. So I did get back to Councilmember Baldernagel on that. I believe that we can, I've gone ahead, it's within my authority to authorize it. So I have authorized communication staff to acquire the necessary equipment. I don't have a timeline yet on its arrival and installation, but we think then it'll provide the council with some of the concern that you had voiced from the workshop of the prior meeting on the 26th of November. So with that, I think our intention would be, lacking any concern from the council, is to continue to broadcast the citizen comment portion of our meetings, and then we'll get the new equipment installed as a safeguard measure, and we're hoping, I'll have more information on what the timeline for having that installed. And I guess I just want to make sure, because I've kind of referenced our conversation, I'll certainly make sure that I've captured your comments correctly, Councilmember Baldernagel.
Yes, sir, Mr. Phelps. Thank you. I really appreciate you putting in the effort to do the research and having your staff find out a compatible program that with what we already currently have to meet, in my opinion, both preserving First Amendment rights, but also allowing safeguards to be put in place that are reasonable under circumstances. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
So then, if we're ready, then we'll go ahead and then roll the video portion of my presentation. Hello, I'm Kevin Phelps, and here's a quick update on some of the exciting things happening in our city. Downtown Glendale is filled with festive fun as Glendale Glitters returns. Thank you to the City Council and our community for joining our tree lighting event. There was entertainment for all ages with merry vendors, carolers, and even a visit from Santa Claus. The glittering light displays will shine every evening from 5 to 10 p.m. until the new year. We hope residents and visitors will come take in the holiday magic and enjoy some local shopping and treats around downtown. It was an incredible 2 days of inspiration, motivation, and learning for almost 30 employees, including myself, at the Arizona Women Leading Government State Conference in November. Team Glendale had a highly visible presence with Communications Director Sue Bredding serving both as conference co-chair and as a main stage panel moderator. Additionally, video producer Jessica Mensch served as an MC. There was also a special breakout session about Glendale's mentoring program. The panel included Deputy Chief Information Officer Arlene Camello, Assistant City Manager Vicky Rios, Field Operations Administrator Sonia Sarmiento, Human Services Coordinator Candace Schulte, and Director of Field Operations Michelle Watanko. It was a wonderful chance for women in all walks of their government careers to learn from other passionate women who are dedicated to serving Arizona communities and are driving positive change across the state. Everybody get ready to play ball. Construction crews are making great progress on the new ball fields at Heroes Regional Park. They are currently installing pickleball courts, artificial turf for a soccer field, and ramadas. That work should be done by the end of the year. There will also be baseball and softball fields, a mini pitch space, walkways, a dog park, and a playground. Construction is expected to be completed in April. Congratulations goes out to Human Resource Program Manager Lorena Sanchez-Zump and her HR team for winning a prestigious Theo Award at the National Risk and Insurance Conference. The team streamlined the process in how firefighter cancer claims are processed by improving communication, setting clear guidelines, and providing faster, personalized support to simplify navigating benefits. We're very proud of their hard work. Community Services Director Jean Marino is retiring, and we want to thank her for her 3 decades of service to our city. Jean has held a wide variety of roles in Glendale Police Department, City Prosecutor's Office, Innovation and Technology, and in the City Manager's Office. She even served as the city's first Director of Organizational Performance. Jean is an innovative leader who is always focused on finding solutions to help her team thrive. Thank you to Jean for her hard work and dedication. We wish her the best in her next chapter. Glendale police officers went above and beyond to help a 12-year-old boy after his bicycle was stolen. You see, Arson Guerrero had worked hard to save up money to buy his bike, which he used to get to and from school. But one day, after carefully locking it up while he was in the classroom, he discovered his bike had been stolen. That's when the Glendale Police Department's Community Action Team jumped in to help, surprising him with a brand new bicycle. Arson and his mom could not have been more grateful. We're so proud of our officers for making a difference. And finally, the holidays are just around the corner, so I'd like to personally wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I'll be back with more updates in the new year.
City Attorney's report.
No report, thank you.
Council items of special interest. Councilmember Baldenegro, have you any?
None at this time, sir. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Not at this time, Mayor.
Councilmember Melner.
Not this time.
Councilmember Tomchoff.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes, Mayor, I have one. And my item of interest is that we bring back for discussion all of the options presented to the City Council for alternatives regarding the future of the Velma Teague Library. I don't believe it was thoroughly discussed, and we also have new council members coming on that I think have a right to have an opportunity to add their ideas to the mix, seeing as it's all going to occur on their watch. Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor Hugh.
Nothing, Mayor.
I have nothing. Motion to go into executive session. Can I get a motion?
So move.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Been seconded. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay.
Aye.
Here's the ayes have it, do have it. So we're going recess into executive session. Thank you.